having some trouble with the printer, because that's what printers do. They have to remind you of their technology. So I'm racing out of the house, and I hope I remember all my points here, so a little bit from memory tonight. But anyway, well, welcome back. Thank you for coming again to this very in-depth series. Really glad to have this time to move slowly through the Requiem. And we're going to cover two rather short movements tonight, and then two more next time, and we'll just be done in time for the performance. And so the two that we're going to cover tonight switch gears in a major way. Even though they're both rather short, the first of the two movements that we're going to listen to tonight are setting of the Lamb of God, which does appear in the Book of Common Prayer. We don't use this text weekly, but it is in the Book of Common Prayer, and it's like the Kyrie eleison. You might remember that from early on. Lord have mercy, and then Christe eleison, Christ have mercy. Lord have mercy, Kyrie eleison. I had mentioned that was probably a litany because it has a repetitive structure. Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, each 3 times. So like a 9-part structure to that, which originally probably went priest and then congregation, priest congregation, or some sort of. And same thing here. The way this would have been done in chant would be this phrase twice, and then a third, actually 3 times, and then the last time the text changes slightly. But anyway, I just want to make a point about this particular text. There is only one time, there's one time that this text changes, and it's for the Requiem. I don't do that very well. Normally the text looks like this. In the Requiem, this last phrase, miserere nobis, have mercy on us, changes to dona eis Requiem. So, Agnus Dei, Lamb of God, who carries the sins of the world, is what that kind of literally means in Latin. Tollis is to carry something. I had a Latin professor once tell me that in the way that you would pick something up off someone's shoulders and put it onto your own, which I think is so we like take a toll. Some English words that are kind of similar to this. So who carries the sins of the world or takes away the sins of the world, dona eis Requiem. So that is the text. And then normally in the chant that would be sung twice, and then the third time, the last word changes to sempiterno. So very straightforward text. I do want, like last week, since it's so short and it's fairly repetitive, I do want us to have this in our ears. Some of you've sung this already. So we're going to do some Latin pronunciation here, okay? So the first 2 words are Agnus Dei. Try it.
Agnus Dei.
Yeah, it's Agnus like onion. So Agnus Dei, and then qui tollis.
Qui tollis.
Peccata mundi.
Peccata mundi.
Dona eis.
Dona eis.
Give us Requiem.
Requiem.
Oh, well, actually, first time that's just that. And then the last word is sempiterno.
Sempiterno.
Good, all right. You're all in the choir. So your audition is, I can only make that joke once, can't I? So, okay. Anyway, Agnus Dei, qui tollis peccata mundi, dona eis Requiem, and then Requiem sempiterno. All right, so just go ahead and this is going to be a lot of. I'm not going to use a visual at first here. I just want to focus on the actual, just the sound. You can kind of follow along. metaphor, but it's just, anyway, okay. Anyone want to throw anything out or say anything? I hate to put you on the spot, but any just initial kind of list reactions or any thoughts? We put you on the spot like that, but I just.
It seems like before you talked about there's not really a home note, but this one seemed to have more resolution. And really like
Spends a lot of time doing that, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm glad you feel that. I thought, should I count the measures? It spends a lot of time doing that, bringing us kind of bringing this up. Yeah. Yeah, and both of these movements do that quite a bit. There's this sense of resolution. It's very consonant. There's really very little of the darkness and the tension that we get in some of the other movements. Good. Anything else? Jump in. I want to remind, remind ourselves where we came from last week. You might remember we were talking about the alto solo last week, so the altos are going to remember. In other words, where we're coming from is this movement. Very emotional plea, which really is the words of which aren't anymore really involved texts like the Domine Jesu Christe that talk about fear and the abyss. It's not really like that. It's just a prayer, merciful Lord Jesus, grant them rest. But it's filled with, we talked about that last week, very, very dark place. So what I want to do is I want to listen to the end of the Pie Jesu and then just the beginning of the Agnus Dei, where we are now, to note the shift. So we'll talk about like what he's doing musically there. Let me find, that's not it. I'll have to go over here to Spotify, which is not. All right, so Pie Jesu ends with this phrase, long phrase. You suggest things to a medium when there are no words, and it can really affect what you're hearing. So now that we're there, thank you. Thank you. What's he doing to make it sound like that? What is it? It's like sonically. What do you think? What do you think? Are there any details that maybe that's picking it out of the air. What instrument that is on top, by the way? Sorry, I hear myself treating you like students, and I shouldn't do that. It's like, who can tell me what instrument that is? That's clarinet. feel like I'm treating like 12-year-olds. Anyway, yeah, clarinet.
Does it sound like bird songs?
I don't know. I don't know. There's something about, and it's probably its association, but clarinet has a kind of a purity to the tone. There's no vibrato. So it also, I think, gives it maybe a clarity to the tone. Mozart's writing for clarinet is so often has especially slow movements. I've got an example here of his clarinet writing. It just has some people will say Mozart has this kind of innocence of his childhood. Not all of his music, but he has this in an era the classical era, that brought more humor and more kind of a sunny disposition into the mix. That's an overgeneralization. But anyway, he's writing for clarinet. Let me just play some of his. This is Mozart. For the tone to sort of blossom slowly, that maybe that's the sound of kind of, I don't know what it is, it's hard to place, but what a perfect choice. What a perfect choice if you want to evoke this kind of lightness and something dawning. There's also something unusual, it's kind of hard to hear, and I'll show you in what he has the orchestra doing. So let me show you what the orchestra. So first of all, there's harp going and where he has the harp is playing, it's a little bit hidden down there, but it just kind of adds a little bit of movement and a little ping to the sound. The cellos are also doing a there's movement in other words down there, but it's very kind of you can see it in this video. I think a kind of a shape he's giving the Requiem. And this is kind of, hold on, I wasn't supposed to come up yet. I'm kind of seeing a pattern here. And talked about how the introit and Kyrie, when we first started, I said, that I think he's thinking the introit as although no one's actually processing, it originally was a processional song, chant. And the Kyrie is kind of like, this is the entrance of the organ, it's sort of like all in place. So entering into divine presence. And then there's this solo, very emotional confrontation or confession of anguish, fear. And interestingly, that also makes mention of the sacrifice. Now obviously Duruflé didn't choose the words, but he did cut out certain movements so that perhaps you can have this shape. And he also said it, to emphasize this very personal, emotional kind of thing. That hooks into the next sequence, which I think mirrors the first. The Sanctus, Holy, Holy, Holy. But again, divine presence, sort of divine presence 2.0. And then a very individual response, which is the Pies Domine. All soloist. What we have to remember is that these chants are in the midst of the Eucharist portion of what would be the Eucharist portion of the service. But specifically, these two, the Agnus Dei Lux Aeterna, would be the music surrounding the actual movement of taking bread and wine. Right? And so I think there's a beautiful progression here in which these two movements are all about And so a personal note here is thinking to myself, I know I have some Mozart Requiem, but Verdi Requiem, barely all our Requiems, but this to me captures what it feels like to me to be in church. There's something about the lightness of the Agnus Dei. It's kind of sunny. It's joyful, but not, it's not hallelujah chorus joyful. It's just a kind of quiet joy, And there's movement. There are people moving, and there's some singing. There's just something about that, I think with the Agnus. We'll keep listening. And then Lux Aeterna also. It's both of these movements are all about consolation, closure, hope, all those kinds of things. So anyway, I think that's one way to see it. And then next week, we're actually going to see the two movements that aren't actually part of the main Requiem itself. They're kind of coded in a way, but the Liberame and In Paradisum are kind of, I think, their own pair. It's this constant bringing to, so, okay. Any questions about that? Makes sense. So, okay. So back to the Agnus Dei. Let's see. Why don't we go back to the video? And let's go to the recording. All right. So back to. That's not it. Now, this is basically a chant. Note for note, the original plain chant. And then repeated. It's altos, now soprano. Beautiful melody. We'll talk about this in a second. So there's altos, now tenors. Sing two. Growing, second note. And it says longer tail. Which hooks into another statement. Soprano alto. Sorry to pause it. I won't go into the details of the chord structure and all this, but it's doing something similar to the song, just which is like this key, and then suddenly there's a switch to this key, and there's no transition. Which, maybe different ways to hear this, but I love the feeling like it's their voices coming from different places and different keys and it's like the songs of the faithful in different voices and different, registers. And here you go. Sopranos and altos. And finally, all four voices. For closure. Again. Isn't that a wonderful moment? It's a wonderful moment. How can we explain what's going on here musically? Now, you can't really explain anything. If music is worth anything, you can't explain it all away. But you hear the resolution. You don't have a degree in music to hear come to a home note. Couple of things, and then we'll talk about the extension here. There are so many ways he could have resolved that. That's really the key. That's really composers did it for 300 years, let's say, since mid-Baroque. Because there's the whole note, and it implies that it's in minor, a darker key. So a typical way to do it would be, again, like this. Instead, he's giving us a mirror, first of all. He goes down, stepping down from the top, and then he has the bass step up So the outer voices go. In other words, for a kind of closure that it's wonderful closure, but it's not what you're used to hearing. It's like a surprise, a wonderful kind of journey there we don't expect exactly. Maybe that's saying overstating it. Another thing that's interesting is is where we should be minor, but he gives us major. In fact, he gives us three major chords. Hear it? It's three unusually so major chords. All of them have that kind of bright, sort of lighter sound, and especially after that note. But he's not done there with that. It's like we get a double resolution, double closure, because this chord then leads to. It's like a resolution. It's the landing is even beyond the choir. Another surprise, another little sort of and what he's doing there, to try to put it as succinctly as I can, is he's using a movement we've heard a million times. Which is in most Western music, folk tunes, pop tunes, hymns, that, where the bass goes, so, do, like that, is in so many tunes that you've all heard. All right, so he's giving us this really surprising and beautiful and major key resolution that then resolves in this very satisfying way to new harmony. Another one of those moments I think is just, there's sort of like, wordless, down deep, beyond words, however you want to put it, kinds of moments. Let me play it for you again. Let's see. If I could have written just one of these chord progressions, I'd die a happy man. Back up a little further. So there's one other ingredient, since he's having one voice at a time, one vocal section at a time. First the altos, then the tenors, then sopranos and altos, and then the basses join in. I think that's also part of the sense of the resolution. This kind of influx of sound, warm, consoling, resolving sound. The French especially are so attuned to the emotional tone of harmonic color, instrumental color. I think more than you'll find in other composers. Just a purely, it's not even necessarily melodic, it's just a plea. Dona, A's, Dona, rising higher and higher and higher so that he can again resolve all that. Listen to the trajectory, how do I say this? The long trajectory, he uses harmony, uses melody to bring this home to take even longer. So in other words, the basses start kind of a new path. thinking, ooh, this sounds a little bit sunrisey, a little bit like something like a new day, something dawning, I think it kind of makes it explicit in a way, because clarinet becomes the end, if I can find it. Where? There we are, right there. French horn. Wants to evoke a sense of space, because French horn, or horn, traditionally had a calling function, and it still kind of has that sound like it's calling from, afar. And so I think that's maybe one. So anyway, and we come back to where we started here, but with this beautiful, beautiful resolution. Movement. So I just did that, so let's move on to Lux Aeterna. All right, so Lux Aeterna luceat eis Domine, the eternal light shine on them, Lord, cum sanctis tuis in aeternum, your saints forever, who are gracious. So in other words, Lord, you who are gracious is really quia pius es, who are gracious. So, all right, let's do some Latin again. I'm sorry, this doesn't seem pedantic, but anyway. So the first two words are Lux Aeterna, luceat eis. It's the Latin is beautiful because the lux and luce is from the same root. It's like light eternal enlighten them is kind of the closest thing we could say in English, from the same root. Anyway, so Domine, cum sanctis tuis.
Cum sanctis tuis.
With your saints. In aeternum. Quia pius es.
Quia pius es.
All right, so piety. I mean, a lot of these are very English words today. So, okay. All right, let's just listen. And then we come full circle, actually, for the text at the very, very beginning of the service. So we have another prayer to rest eternal, give them, Lord, and light perpetual shine upon them, for you are gracious. So it kind of hooks into the text, the Lux Aeterna text, but it's almost word for word the text that begins the whole piece, and from which the title Requiem gets its name. So from these first words. So Requiem aeternam dona eis Domine, et lux perpetua luceat eis, quia pius es. Right, one more time. conclude. It's like a piece of conclusions, piece of closures. So beautiful. Anyway, sorry. Okay, choir. So we have 2 choir members here. Is that right?
We had 3, but one had to take a phone call.
Remind us in the room what the choir is doing here. That's kind of interesting in this movement. Either an alto, tenor, or a bass. Ooh, yeah, right. Right. Now I don't know if we can read Duruflé's mind, possible, but just as a choice. I mean, I don't know what we think about having the choir. Could easily have had the entire choir, or had just the soprano singing that, and then maybe orchestral accompaniment. We've heard that in other movements. We just heard it, but not here. In fact, it's also the only a cappella moment of the whole piece? We'll have to double check that. I think it might be, but it's just the choir. So we got our instrumental frame, color, and then. Self-soothing poetry, self-soothing song. But yeah, lullaby. Yeah. Other thoughts. Who, as opposed to the whole choir singing. If the whole choir were singing the words together, what else do you think? Would it change the sound?
Yes, it would change the sound.
Sorry?
Yes, it would change the sound.
Yeah, I know. Or how is it? Why is he doing that?
It's lighter when you do this. You have that more ethereal feel.
Yeah, it kind of lightens it, maybe kind of takes some of the weight off. Yeah.
And you get that ethereal. I mean, if you can't feel the angel's wings beating.
Yeah, right. Like an aura around the sound. Maybe. Yeah. I haven't really thought about that. Yeah.
And what was David Charles's word? Sonority.
Yeah, it's pure sonority.
Together, it's a different sound from a set of voices with a set of instruments.
Absolutely,
By
yeah.
definition, going to be just a little different.
This is why I'm asking, you see. Yeah, good, yeah. That's
I
right.
think kind of gives that image of like that heavenly choir.
You have to. I think so too. You have to think of that as a symbol itself of a choir singing these hymns. Yeah. And kind of from afar, so it's like a muted sound, But yeah, there's so many sides to it. It's from such a simple choice. But it's not how often have you ever done that, right? How often I'm trying to think of any other examples I can think of where the composer asks one section to sing the words and the other 3 to just go ooh or
There's some Christmas songs, some Advent and Christmas songs, where they would ask for that.
Right, yeah. You want that real warm. It's very, very gentle too, isn't it? Very, very gentle. Yeah, sure.
I'm going on here. In the Honors Bay,
Yeah.
where they're talking about taking away sins, sins often described as missing the mark, Archer's term. But the sound through that and through the end of this requiem is this straight line. Never wavers.
Oh, right.
When the men are singing the same note, everything's going on.
When we finally get words.
Oh, right.
Sopranos and tenor just sing the same.
Just one note. Yeah.
So
And
it's
then
the
the second
opposite
time,
of
the
sins.
altos and basses will sing that same note.
So in the Archer's metaphor, it's straight as an arrow.
It's right.
Yeah.
And I think even if you're not thinking about that literally, just sonically, being rooted and being centered, and being part of something that is centering, which is what worship does too. Communal acts of worship, being part of something that's centering, and I do like that about how there's this line that runs through the Requiem. It's interesting because the piece opens. It's not one note, but it is unison, which is itself a choice. So we get the I forget what I don't have the score with me. Anyway, it's many music. Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah. Oh, it's anyway. The point is that the men enter. Which is itself kind of a centering, focusing, arrow pointing, kind of thing. Yeah, which is what we hear next. Why is this so wonderful? And I do ask because I really do love hearing the different kind of sides of this. Talk about the winds. Again, that's a choice. No strings, just woodwinds. Evoking light and different ways to talk about that. I guess they do it twice, don't they? Now with flute. The flute's a little heavy in this recording. I think it's supposed to add just a little sweetness behind it. Anyway. I want to be in altos. Anyway, to your point, what you're saying, this passage. Who writes a piece of music on one note?
This guy.
Yeah, you write it over and over. And it's moving around, and there's part of it. There's something magical about that. I had a conductor, I don't know why I'm mentioning who said this anyway, had pointed out that woodwinds often have a very personal sound, or they can be used that way. Not like categorically, they always sound that way, but they can be used in that manner, partly because they are always solo instruments in an orchestra. You don't have a section of oboes. If you have two oboes, they're playing two different parts. They might play in unison a little bit, but mostly you want one oboist. Probably because of the tone color, just has such a kind of an intensity to it that it would be hard to make 10 of them blend. But it's they're solo instruments, so kind of solo sounds. And so I think if he wants to put us in this place that's kind of smaller scale and more personal, again, for me, and this is editorializing, so if I were conducting this, I would suggest, I have no evidence to Duruflé was thinking, but the more open and the freer and kind of that sound of the Agnus Dei, I get a sense of movement, and I get a sense, for me, of what it feels like after I've taken communion. That quiet, individual prayer, to me, it captures this. So anyway, so woodwinds. There's like an emotional tone to that, especially oboe. It's very vocal, and I don't know, kind of plaintive sound. like two streams kind of doing similar things at the same time is jazz and all of the rich color it brought to popular styles, but especially jazz, and then classical. It's not you're going to offer Beethoven, including the piece on major second chord, you know, but you do here, so. Okay. Just one thing about the rich world of melody and harmony here. You've heard me say that this is modal, that uses the medieval scales, and that opens up a whole palette for him, in which melody and harmony can behave in ways we're not used to, new possibilities. But then sometimes, as I just mentioned, he will use traditional harmony with its sense of pull and resolution, like I just went, to kind of pull us in for various reasons. And I noticed that this is very so I think that's part of why that's so satisfying as a cadential progression to round the piece out. That he's got very medieval-based, floating, very ethereal kinds of music before this, and then we get this ground. By the way, is that a 1947 chord? It sounds like a today chord. That's wonderfully, current. I don't know. You know how it goes. So in other words, what I'm saying is he's using, when I say traditional, like tonality, as we're still using it in many ways, in popular and other kinds of music. We call tonal music. Major minor key music, in other words. The same key we use to sing Happy Birthday and church hymns, and so that kind of thing. So, all right. Good. Any other comments or observations or thoughts?
An observation that I had just listening to that, very grounded at the end, and the last words are, "Let light perpetual shine upon them." And then you have that grounding chord, and then you get that
A little bit of light, isn't it? It's just
you get grounded again.
Yeah. And then together.
And then it all just.
And then it's all like melded into
Yes.
one beautiful light shining, Yeah. It's really is. Oh, and something else. You might notice that the strings have a kind of an unusual sound when they're playing under the voices. That's because he tells it's just lower strings, first of all. No violins, so it's viola, cello, bass. No vibrato. He tells them to play straight, which you almost never hear from a string player. They're taught to play with vibrato. And so is he after a sound that is unusually harmonious? Because when you play with straight tone, you're going to hear the harmonies with a kind of a clarity that you would not get if there was this. So vibrato changes the pitch slightly, and you get 15 people doing that, cellos all at the same time. It does warm the sound up. It warms the sound up because you get, it's like this ripple effect, or I don't know how to describe it. It's like this little cloud of pitch around the center. It warms it. But if you want just perfect 20/20 vision clarity of the harmonies, you want straight tone. I don't know if he's also thinking maybe organ sonority, there too, perhaps.
Is it because, does the choir sing the same notes that are harmonizing at the end? Do they all sing the same note?
They do, so in unison.
That's why.
Yeah, I don't know that he's so in other words, he wants more of a, I don't know, yeah, perhaps this kind of, that same kind of clarity, an unclouded sound. To my ear, since I'm biased as a music historian, I think everything is about history, and so it reminds me actually of, if you've ever heard of a viola da gamba, is a Renaissance instrument that you hold like a cello, but it's fretted like a guitar, and so you can't play with vibrato. It's completely straight tone. And they have soprano, alto, tenor, bass versions of them, so you can have a whole ensemble of string sound that is perfectly straight. And so is he also, I don't know, is he calling upon a kind of archaic sound there? Like a I don't know, Palestrina, I'm not sure. That may be going on the limb. That may just be something I'm hearing because I've heard people other comment before. But regardless, it's this very, very, I'm saying it, let me let you hear it. Real quick, I know you've heard it 7 times already, but. I wanted to just make a couple of quick remarks, because I know we have just maybe a little time, although it's only 5 minutes, looks like, but just about chant, just a few statements, because I didn't really do much by way of introduction in terms of chant, and this is a piece that is wholly based on chant, plain chant. Just a couple of things that are good to know about plain chant. Plain chant is has always been sung a cappella, no instruments, has been always been sung in unison for as far back as we know. So it is always unison melody, no matter who's in the room, treble and bass, boys and men, women, whoever's singing it, it's in unison. And I'll ask my freshmen, why do you think that is? And I do that to them on purpose because inevitably someone will say, well, back in the Middle Ages they hadn't invented harmony yet, or they hadn't invented instruments yet. No, but thank you for saying that. It's a choice. It's a choice. There are many different ways to worship God around the world, thankfully. And if you look at the old, the Psalms are a noisy, clanging cymbal, trumpet blaring affair. But for the Christian church in the West, coming out of the Roman Empire, the Christian church wanted to sonically set itself apart from everyday life. So for the Christian church, worship, this is a big generalization, but was about a place set apart, in every way possible. So the monastic system, you probably know, was the main driver for really the reawakening of cultural life in Europe. I mean, it was Norman Cantor, historian, said that the monastic system was the engine that rebuilt Europe after the fall of Rome. Innovations in agriculture, et cetera, and literacy led to trade, led to cities, led to the rebirth of urban culture as we know it in Europe. For the earlier Middle Ages, the great cities of Europe, Paris, et cetera, were kind of a backwater. Buildings, the marble had been carted away for other uses, and so when we think of medieval, like Notre Dame and all that, that's 12th century. That's after the wave of innovation and trade that the monastic system brought. Why am I mentioning that? Because, so in other words, what's happening here is we have monasteries that are preserving learning and worship and beauty and a place set apart, islands of calm and order in which learning could occur and of course worship, walled in, often and out in the countryside, remote. They were singing most of the day, most of the service. They were worshiping all day and night. The first service was before sunrise, lauds, and then there was a service at 6 called prime. They used the Roman word for that, prime. First hour is 6 in the morning. Then every 3 hours. Terce was at 9, Sext was at noon, Nones was at 3, Vespers was at dusk, and then Compline was the bedtime service. And most of the service was sung, so these monks were singing all day and night. And it was a very centering thing. So, okay, let's come back to what I was saying. But they wanted it to sound as different from Roman pagan music as they could get. So no instruments, there were plenty of them. No strong beat. It's not that the beat had not been invented yet either, or strong rhythm. They knew what that sounded like. They wanted to. It's a very unusual music, and there are other chant traditions that share kind of some similar qualities in that they try to step outside. But let me just mention, I've done some study African music and cultures in which there are traditions. Africa is a big place, many cultures, but one thing, many of especially West Africa, it is a singing, dancing, communal instrument playing affair in their worship practices. So just to point out, it's one way, one way. But for this tradition, it was no beat, no instruments, just the purity of song itself, melody. So, and a lot of what he's doing here reflects that, and you can hear it. I'm done basically. For instance, even though it's not actually chant, the opening of this movement, the woodwind material is not in a "My country 'tis a three, this is in 3, 1, 2, 3, 1," or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Most Western music, hymns, folk songs, even pop tunes now, are in some sort of regular beat, either 2 or 3 or 4. That's not what's going on here. In the beginning, you have 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, and 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Remember I had you count a couple weeks ago.
I was hoping you would do this because it's amazing.
Isn't it beautiful? Hildegard von Bingen, medieval composer, mystic, called chant like being a feather on the breath of God. Being a feather on the breath of God, which is just what a wonderful image. And so it has this freedom and a floating kind of wave-like quality. It was very special. So. Okay, thanks, folks. Appreciate the comments and everything. I'll see you next week for our last one. And I appreciate all your perspectives.